Shalom, Erev Tov.
Hello, good evening. Our next guest needs no introductions. Minister Avigdor Liberman, in the past few years, he has been involved exactly in the topics that we are involved in. He was Minister of Strategic Affairs, he was Foreign Minister, and he's currently Minister of Defense. And you forgot that I was chairperson of Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. That's still Foreign Affairs and Security. You are also Minister of Infrastructure, Minister of Transportation, but we are dealing with strategy, foreign affairs, and security, and there's no one more suitable than the Minister Avigdor Liberman to tell us a bit about where the state of Israel is heading towards in the security field. And I'd like to actually start from the personal element. There's this song, Israeli song, that says, "Things you see from there, from here you can't see from there." Now you're on the 14th floor in that building in the military headquarters. You know that building well. The Minister of Defense is in one building, the Chief of General Staff in another, and the head of the Intel Directorate runs around between the two offices trying to calm things down. Yes, he's in very good shape. And I'd like to ask you today that you're in that office, which of your previous opinions look a bit different today, and which different perspectives do you have today now that you're on the 14th floor, and perhaps a few new things that you've learned there? Well, first of all, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but what you see from there and what I saw from here, it's exactly the same, but perhaps it's even more prominent and clear-cut. I wish to emphasize the fact that I try to really open up my mind and see what can be changed, but I couldn't change anything. Actually, everything I thought was further reinforced and proven. I mean, everything I saw from there, I also see from here. But your question is also incorrect. I would word it a bit differently. What about the world? What's happening with the world? Where is it heading? There are two very things that really stand out that kind of go beneath the radar. There's one topic, and I tried talking about it recently. That's some kind of an arrangement in Syria. This is the first time since World War II that there is a significant agreement or a significant political crisis without American involvement. I mean, what we can see, the rebels, the regime under Russian, Iranian, and Turkish auspices, the Americans are simply irrelevant. I don't remember any other example since World War II like that. Now, the second point, in the U.S., there is this thing that they call the Intel Council. I think there are 16 different intel agencies in the U.S., and once every 4 years, they issue an integrative report. I mean, the most recent report was published about a month ago. And this report, they work on such a report for about 2 years, and probably something like 2,500 people worked on that recent report, really the finest minds from 35 countries, and I do not remember such a pessimistic report ever. And I recommend that you all go over it. This is a report that was supposed to turn on a red light in all the capitals of the world. I do not remember such a report that was so pessimistic, a report that's a harbinger that foresees a lot, and I'm trying to be PC. It projects a lot of uncertainty. So what does the state of Israel learn from that? We first of all need to understand that it's not all up to us. We live in a very different environment. On the one hand, a vacuum has been created, a void was created here in the Middle East and left by the U.S., and I guess the entire world is moving in a bad direction. And I'm not talking about my own assessments. I'm just talking about the assessment of this report written by the Intelligence Council of the U.S. We always try to ask, where did we, or what was our mistake? But we shouldn't think too much of ourselves. You know, not everything depends on us. We need to understand the environment in the region we live in. As for the state of Israel, I think that we really did our best. I mean, if I look at our entire environment and what's happening in all the countries in the region, and relatively to what's happening in the region, the state of Israel has managed to maintain things under control. We are still not a part of Scandinavia or the Benelux, but still, for the State of Israel to hold such a conference with guests coming from all over the world, a scientific, theoretic conference. I don't imagine such a conference taking place in Syria or Lebanon or any other country around us. And people who, let's say, walk around in Tel Aviv, I meet guests from overseas every day. And, you know, I just met somebody before I met you, and they're constantly surprised with how calm and stable the State of Israel, how everything is in such a boom here, and they're wondering how do we do it. And also the economic parameters, the scientific parameters are just fine. You don't need to always see, you know, the gloomy side of things, and we don't need to suffer from over self-criticism. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be improved, a lot of things that can be done better. But as I look at the total picture, if I look at the global trend with everything that's happening in our region, as I look at all the threats and all the challenges that we face, and you know, if you look at the bottom line, okay, so we have a new president in the U.S. He's been in office for 3 days. And let's say if you were to advise him what he should do in the Middle East in three aspects. First of all, how to lead his allies who are feeling kind of neglected after the Obama administration, what to do with the nuclear agreement with Iran, and how to address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Which advice would you give him from the perspective of the guy who's in charge of Israel's security? Well, first of all, I think it's really the worst idea possible to give advice to the Americans. Once again, you know, we're a small country, they're a global superpower. I don't think that I think that they are not in any shortage of consultants and advisors, and we were never asked to give them advice. I never give advice without somebody requesting it, but I asked you to do it. Look, another thing, what I suggest to everyone, to the Europeans, the Americans, and the Russians, first of all, not to get involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Forget about it. If you want to help resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, well, first of all, it's best you forget about it. The over-involvement of the superpowers, especially European involvement, it's only in the way. They never contributed anything to the solution of the problem. They only complicated it. I think that they have no understanding of the root of the conflict here, how it evolves, and they want to just force themselves upon us without being requested or asked or invited. After all the failures, there were so many talks with so many political diplomatic elements, and I said, show me one case in which you succeeded. After you will succeed doing so in one place, you can come and teach us. I never saw them succeed anywhere, not inside Europe. They never resolved the issue of Cyprus, and you still have the Kosovo and Transnistria, and also Bosnia Herzegovina and the Serbian republics. Everything there is, you know, very shaky, and we are witnessing a Europe that's looking for its way, that's splintering. We've seen Brexit, and we can see the mood in Scotland and in Ireland. And after all that, and you know, I'm not even mentioning Africa or Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq. And after all that, they come to give us advice on how to do peace here. Okay, so we won't give the Americans advice, and we won't listen to the Europeans. But we, as Israelis, where do we want to go? Look, I can explain to you exactly. And I like to remind everyone, there is this very famous sentence by Albert Einstein. He once defined stupidity: to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's stupidity. Everything we've been doing since 1993, for 24 years now, we've kept doing the same thing time and again, and we keep expecting a new outcome. So I once explained to you that I agree that I'm a bad man. I speak with a heavy Russian accent. I'm a settler. I have a beard, and I'm friends with Aryeh Deri and a few other folks. And so I have all the features, all the traits of a bad man. But I'm asking, but there were some good people here. You had Ehud Barak's government and Ehud Olmert's government and Sharon's government. How come they didn't manage to solve the problem? I mean, you cannot offer Abu Mazen more than what Ehud Olmert offered in Annapolis. When I saw his proposals from Annapolis to Abu Mazen, I was shocked. I don't know if any of the people sitting here have ever seen the Israeli proposals, what was proposed to him in Annapolis. Everything, including dividing up Jerusalem and opening up the refugee issue and the evacuation of Judea and Samaria. It was all offered. And what did we get in return? Nothing. The question is, his answer was a no. Why? Because he doesn't have the capacity in order to truly sign a dramatic agreement that would be a reality-changing agreement. You need is powerful leadership that has support in the field, that is capable of persuading, of leading. I mean, when Sadat and Begin, when they broke through, when they crossed the Rubicon and they signed an agreement, and both were very strong leaders who benefited overwhelming support. 112 Knesset members in the Israeli Knesset signed the Camp David peace accord, but Abu Mazen is an illegitimate leader. The elections for the Palestinian parliament were supposed to take place, both for the president and for the parliament. The election was supposed to be held 10 years ago. I saw the polls from the Palestinian Institute, Shkaki's Center, and other places. Over 60% of the Palestinian population wants to see him gone. Even if he'll try to be re-elected as the chairperson of the street committee where the Mukata is situated, he won't be elected. He has no support. That's one thing. Another thing, there is no Palestinian Authority. It simply does not exist. We keep forgetting that. You have Hamastan in the Gaza Strip. You have the Fatah land in Judea and Samaria. And even in line with the Palestinian constitution, even according to the Palestinian constitution, he's simply illegitimate. Who will we sign with? So what's the solution? Let's assume there is a Palestinian leader who does have the authority and was elected. What do you have to offer to him to resolve the conflict? What I have to offer is something simple. First of all, I do not believe in the ability to achieve an agreement with the Palestinians in a bilateral framework. It has to be part of an overall regional agreement. It has to be part of a comprehensive agreement with the entire Sunni moderate world. And then they can come and be part of that arrangement on their own. The Palestinians have no capacity. It's important to understand that, because if Arafat didn't sign, and he was much more powerful than Abu Mazen, but he didn't sign on what Barak offered to him. And if Abu Mazen didn't sign, then nobody will sign. It's important to understand that. So the only way to reach an agreement with them, and I'm not talking about peace, this concept of peace is irrelevant in the Middle East, and 99% of all the victims and all of the bloodshed is between Muslims and other Muslims. It has nothing to do with us, and we see all the alliances and the wars and the hatreds and the love stories. It all changes from one year to the next. It's all arrangements, and the guarantee to such an arrangement is only power, and this is why we need to reach arrangements. And the only possible arrangement is an arrangement with the moderate Sunni Muslim world. And one more thing, all of the models that we see today, we've seen so far, have no logic, no rationale into them. The model suggested to us is that there will be a Palestinian state established, which will be Judenrein, without even one Jew, and we become a binational country with 20% Arabs who identify themselves as Palestinians. This is why a principle for an arrangement is not territories for peace, but rather territorial and population swaps. Okay, so let's say there will be a legitimate Palestinian leader, and the Saudi prince and the president of Egypt come and they say to you, okay, sir, please, you suggest where the borders will pass, which populations in which states. Like I said, the settlement blocks will remain under Israeli sovereignty, and many of the Israeli Arab population concentrations they'll get them in return. I talked about territorial and population swap. We won't move anyone. We're just going to move the borders. And now that is impossible from the perspective of international law. We've received endless expert opinions that there are historic precedents for that. International law allows it. There's no reason why we should continue to pay for the triangle, the area of Wadi Ara. They should be part of the Palestinian Authority. Abu Mazen will be delighted to pay them unemployment fees and maternity leave pays and all the other social benefits and allowances. And I think that anybody who in times of war goes out and demonstrates for Hizballah and for Hamas never even saw one demonstrator there with an Israeli flag. They only carry Palestinian flags, so there's no reason why they should continue to be Israeli citizens. Okay, so you've mentioned Hamas and Hizballah. The two recent wars with Hamas and Hezbollah were long wars, and there was much criticism about the length, the period of time of these wars from the Israeli population, and there was this feeling that these wars could have been ended more decisively with more significant measures. Today, as the Minister of Defense, will instruct the IDF in case a new confrontation will erupt with Hezbollah or with Gaza. What would you instruct the IDF to do differently? Look, what I've always said, what I said there, I say here, you cannot fight wars if you don't use your full force. It doesn't matter where the next confrontation will break out. We have to use, all of our force. It's not like the Yemenite folk dancing, one step forward, two steps back. You need to recruit your entire military, all of your reservists, and go full force ahead until the other side cries out for help and saying that they are surrendering. You don't stop in the middle. This is the instruction to the IDF. The instruction is to conquer the Gaza Strip. Look, once again, the directive right now is very clear, to go full force until the other side surrenders and raises a white flag, period. If you need to conquer a quarter of the Gaza Strip, then a quarter of the Gaza Strip. If you need to conquer more than that, then more than that. But it has to be a war at a very powerful profile.
You're also responsible for defending the interior front. And we know that the IDF, vis-a-vis the northern front, will have to try and stop a huge salvo of missiles, rockets of sorts. What is the strategy that you are directing? What directive are you giving in order to defend the home front and the civil resilience, which is extremely important? Why don't you leave something for the next investigation committee? You can't ask me so much at the same time. You want me to tell you all the street secrets right now? But I think we are very much aware of the problem. And whoever deals with all this is very aware of the long-range missiles, very precise missiles. There is not one, unequivocal answer to that, and hermetic answers. We are aware that they do have missiles that can reach Israel, and that is why we have to, reach a solution quickly, because we cannot close off everything hermetically. We have to reach a point where we can be strong. You were also a foreign minister. Today you are the defense minister. I think we all know that we have to combine political efforts with military efforts, and military efforts have to bring to some sort of political objective. I think you know the president of Russia well. I think he proved to everybody that there are, certain objectives that can be achieved by military means, and he's trying to bring Syria to the place that he wishes to bring. From your experience as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Defense Minister, how can you make sure that the military processes and the political means are compatible? Clausewitz already defined that war is just a continuation of politics, just using different means, but the objective is never war. It's to bring about the best arrangements for you. That is why we are not quick to use force. Nobody's looking for adventures. The state of Israel, doesn't want to conquer Gaza and to build settlements there or in Lebanon. At the end of the day, all we want is for them to leave us in peace. And what has happened, unfortunately, till now, every time we evacuated the area, the area again became basis for attacks on Israel. And what claims can you have against the residents of the Gaza regions? We evacuated 21 settlements. We transferred 10,000 Jews. We went back to the 1967 lines. And after that, what did Hamas do? Hamas emphasized that its first objective is destroying the state of Israel. Same goes for Hizballah. We even got a statement from the Secretary of the UN that Israel was on par with all its commitments, and we went back to the 1967 lines, and instead of getting peace and tranquility, we got Hizballah and Iran on the border, and they keep stating out unequivocally that their objective is to destroy the state of Israel. That is why we have to understand, who are we dealing with? Who are our neighbors? What are our political objectives? Our objectives are to reach a situation in which our neighbors will no longer have that desire, not only the desire, but will stop with that effort to try and destroying the state of Israel. And here too, I don't have to invent the wheel. There were those who already, somebody, wrote years ago, that iron wall. Only when they understand that it's not worth it for them, that they have no chance, and for every provocation of theirs, they will pay such a high price that it will not be worth the efforts. Only then will it end. I want to achieve an arrangement that nobody will even express the fact that they have a desire to destroy us or try us in any way. Let's go back to Syria. You started with Syria. It's important. In Syria, two things are happening, and I'd be happy for you to relate to both of these. First of all, there is something which is very close to genocide. 500,000 people have been murdered. Much more than 500,000. 2 million are injured. An entire generation of children who has not gone to school. Again, they're looking for food among the ruins. Hospitals are being bombarded. Markets are being bombarded. Yes, 7 million displaced people, 11 million are displaced, 5 are, out of Syria, about 6 million within Syria. And nobody's even familiar with the real numbers, but it's so many. It's half of the residents of Syria. What can we, as Jews, who didn't like at all the fact that the world just stood on the side, and again, I don't want to compare anything to the Holocaust, but there is massive murder taking place. What are we doing about it? First of all, we are asking the European Union, what are you doing about it? You come preaching to us. What have you done to stop the bloodshed in Syria? Besides, sitting in those 5-star hotel and just talk and chat there in those hotels. What did you do? Practically speaking, what did you do? What have you done? Where are your achievements? What can you boast? France was always a country with involvement in Syria. It protected Syria. Where are you? Another thing, I don't think this is the place to elaborate, but the state of Israel, has done also on the humane side as much as we could do. And I think we really do have to take into account the fact that Syria is a complex entity. With, it has all the terrorist organizations are involved there, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Hizballah, all sorts of local terror groups. And again, with the involvement of all those, the regional powers, Turkey and Iran, and world powers are involved. So we have to first maintain our own interests. And we have defined our red lines that are understandable to everybody. And another thing, what we can do without risking our own crucial interests, we do. And it costs millions of shekels, and I don't think this is the time to expand on that. But again, in terms of humanitarian help, being humane and everything that you've mentioned, again, our obligations as human beings, we have tried to do. When we look at the Russian intervention in Syria and the Russian Air Force is there flying in the skies of Syria, a very efficient mechanism has been built, a mechanism of deconfliction that we do not collide one with the other. It's a tactical, on the technical dimension with the Russians. We have reached certain agreements. But again, on the strategic levels, I think the Russians have caused our very worst enemy to win. And Hizballah and Assad and the Iranians, what are we doing vis-a-vis the Russians? That our worst enemies will not remain in Syria at all, or at least, and especially not on the Golan Heights borders. Again, we do not hide this. With all our discussions with Russia, we have always demanded as a condition to any arrangement in Syria, we want the Iranians to get out of there. We want Hezbollah to get out of there in order to prevent Russian weapons being transferred to Hezbollah and Lebanon. Who are we demanding this of? We are, again, we don't have, deconfliction with Russia. We have ongoing discourse with the Russians about these subjects, and I hope that in the framework of the same configuration and hopefully with a certain framework that will be achieved in Syria, we will be able to realize all the conditions that we want and convince others as well that this is the crucial thing and it is necessary. I don't know if everybody understands this, but what is the real reason for the conflict in Syria? After all, it is quite clear that what has happened there from the 70s, a small group, an ethnic group, the Alawis, which is 14% of the Syrian population, took control of the regime, and about 63 or 64% of the Syrian population are Sunnis, and the second largest is Kurds, and there are Druze, and there are Christians as well. But so long the majority understands that this small group took control of the entire Syria, and there are no democratic elections, and the majority has no voice, things will not calm down. This too we are trying to explain to the Russians. They do understand this. So Israel, we have unequivocally, at least my position is, Assad has to go. Also, in terms of, the humanistic aspect, we are talking about a person who's used chemical weapons, maybe the first time since the First World War, against his own nation, responsible for the murder of 500,000 citizens, a person who's brought in all sorts of types of terrorism into his own country. He's become an Iranian proxy. He cannot remain in power. I see that our minister has read our publication and has taken our proposals. That's great. What about Iran? The nuclear agreement with Iran was signed in 2015. The state of Israel saw it as a very problematic agreement, opposed it quite forcefully. It even went to the American Congress. This was not a routine at all, and again, by completely ignoring the presidential administration in Washington. Can we ask at this point in time to annul the agreement? Maybe the Prime Minister in his first meeting with Donald Trump, does he have to ask that this agreement be cancelled, annulled, or is there a better policy? I don't know if there is. What is better policy? I don't know if there is one. But, we all have our different approaches and perceptions. And I still want to say to you as follows. I think that the biggest threat is Iran at the end of the day. It's Iran. And if I may, the Secretary of Defense, he says the same thing. I don't want to talk about the nuclear program, but look at the Hizballah, Hamas, the Islamic Jihad. They will not be able to exist one day without the support of Iran. Even in 2016, despite the financial difficulty, Iran only supported Hizballah and gave them $1 billion a year. Now, add to that, the experts, the training, the weapons that they were given, the technology that they were given, and all the political assistance that they keep giving them. Add to that everything they invested in Assad's regime in inside Syria. Add to that how much they invest in Yemen, in the Houthis, and in Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. So just try and understand the situation. The Iranian policy is one that tries to undermine. It tries to undermine all the moderate regimes and administrations, and I say that the top priority is to demolish the state of Israel. It's not just a theoretical threat. I think we have seen in recent months the whole issue of ballistic missiles, and I would like to ask you, what has happened since they signed that nuclear agreement? So what did we have? And on the part of Iran, in the center of Tehran, there was a whole march of ballistic missiles with, again, text in Hebrew to destroy the state of Israel. And there was an international competition for the best caricatures to, again, for Holocaust Now. First prize, $50,000. It ended not so long ago. And, of course, in the month of August, the State Department, they published an annual report to the terror situation around the world, and there too the State Department states that the country that sponsors terrorism is Iran, the state that gives the most support to terrorism. We have no disillusions. The thing is, how do we move forward with them in terms of the nuclear agreement? We did not sign any agreement. There were the five powers, and Germany signed with Iran, and we all think that it is a bad agreement. All the rest, everyone has their perception. And when my, colleague, or when President Trump would like to, take advice from Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'm sure he will give him the advice. I have this basic position. If nobody asks you for advice, don't give advice. Let's, go back to the state of Israel for a moment. Yesterday, there was a discussion in the cabinet about the law for the annexation of Ma'ale Adumim. I don't remember. You don't remember? No. You have a good memory. What is your position on that? My basic approach is that we have to act wisely. And Israeli sovereignty in Ma'ale Adumim is not a function of Israeli legislation, but first and foremost, it is a function of an agreement between us and the USA. And I suggest that before we start, taking different strategic, dramatic positions, let's talk with the USA about all the topics on the table, including Iran, Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian issue, Syria, and Jerusalem as well. I suggest that before we start pulling in different directions, why don't we try and achieve agreements? And again, this administration, I think it's the second day that they have been, functional, in full capacity. On Tuesday, yesterday was Monday, today is Tuesday. So yesterday, Monday, was again the full, they were fully functional as a new administration. I think that until the middle of February, we have some patience. Let's wait a minute. Let's see what happens during that first meeting between President Trump and the Prime Minister of Israel. And again, in accordance with that, we'll see how to add. But you know what? I read during the break that you approved massive building, relatively speaking, in Judea and Samaria without waiting. Look, there's nothing new. We have always built, including under the Obama administration. And there is no reason, again, I have a very, organized doctrine here. It was never a secret. I've always emphasized the settlement blocks. We have left about 2,500, again, where we have approved 2,500 units, some for direct marketing. The rest are under different plans. We're not going back to things that were in the past. We also approved what previous governments committed to, 56 units for the residents of Migron. And also in response to the High Court of Justice, who has said to the government of Israel, decide regarding those 20 homes in Bethel. So the government decided, and so we did. So there are 106 new unions beyond the big settlement blocks. All the rest are within the settlement blocks in Ariel, Ma'ale Adumim, and in other places. So what you said a few months ago, that we have to build in the Jewish neighborhoods of Jerusalem and in the big settlement blocks, and it wouldn't be correct to build beyond, it's still valid. Oh yes, absolutely. Again, I think we need a set of priorities. I'm also for, again, building in Okdim, but we have to have a very clear set of priorities. If you don't know, the minister lives in Okdim, for those who don't know. First of all, the new neighborhoods of Jerusalem. Then the settlement blocks, we have 90% of the population living there. Again, the population that has suffered greatly from the freezing of building in the past few years, and that is my set of priorities. Let's for a moment again go to the trial of Lior Azariah. Before you were a minister, you were in the court and you talked very unequivocally and quite clearly about your opinion. You expressed your opinion about the trial. Today you're Minister of Defense. We have heard very responsible things from you, very words of support. So I don't think you quite heard what I said during that first time when I was in opposition still. And, everything was recorded, everything was photographed. You can go back to everything that was said. I think I was very unequivocal then. I said, I don't know if the soldier acted correctly or not. It is not again, my role. Again, it is the role of the command in the IDF. But there's even confusion here. There's confusion between the two dimensions here. There is the executive operative level, and then there is the legal aspect. And those responsible for the legal aspect, that is the military court. And as to the executive, the operational level, then, of course, the military command is responsible for that. And I said it cannot be that before a trial begins, the previous Minister of Defense said already, it states that he was wrong, that he has undermined the ethics of the IDF. And I'm sure that you know that one cannot accept a situation when the Minister of Defense, stands there at the podium of the Knesset and quotes a military investigation which should be confidential, and a military investigation shouldn't have any weight in the legal process. And then he uses this operational investigation to make certain statements. And I oppose that. And I came out against that clearly. I don't want to ignore the fact. We are talking about an excellent soldier on the one hand. On the other hand, we are talking about a terrorist and a soldier who is there for a year and every day fights terrorism on a daily basis. So yes, there are mistakes that are made every so often, but the courts determined that his deed was a criminal one. Why don't we have to accept the decision of the military court, absolutely, even if we feel less comfortable or sometimes when we feel better about it, but we have to respect that the legal decision. And without any connection to that, I would like to once again say that tens of thousands of soldiers, 18, 90 years old, who fight and combat terrorism on a daily basis, you can't expect that at 100% of the time they all take the right decisions. And even when they err, when they make mistakes, we as a system have to think how we can still support them. Minister of Defense, I think the entire audience will join me in thanking you for, again, appointing the Chief of Staff and extending his term for this fourth year in term. We have an excellent Chief of Staff. We wish him well and a full recovery. Can you tell us a little bit about your working relationship with the Chief of Staff? First of all, I think that, again, the Chief of Staff feels well. He feels very well. I talked to him, and I could hear from his voice that he was feeling well and healthy, and we expect him to come back to work next week. I would also like to say, with your experience, surely you understand that just as, again, appointing the Chief of Staff for a fourth year in term, everything, all the different appointments that he went through in his life, the deputy chief of staff at various senior positions, and there was never any friction, there were never any wars. I guess it's not for naught, it's no coincidence. We have let's say we have a machine that can take everyone into the future 5 years from now. Okay, you close your eyes, you wake up 5 years from now. Where are you? I don't even want to think about it. Not to end on a pessimistic note. I think the Middle East needs way beyond 5 years in order to, turn into a paradise. But I think that one day, even in the Middle East, we'll be able to compete with Scandinavia and the Benelux and North America. But I don't think it's in the next 5 years. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Minister of Defense. Thank you for your sincerity. Thank you for the analysis.